Hey, good morning. I've been in them comments way too long, and before I move on to the next topic, I have to answer the one question that's been asked most often. Why is everything about race? Well, in America, everything legally became about race on March 6, 1857. That's when the Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution does not apply to black people, that free people of color have no rights to be free, and that the Negro has no rights that the white man is bound to respect. Let's take a look at it. His name is Dred Scott, an enslaved black man who lived in Missouri. He was born into slavery in Southampton County, Virginia, and his enslaver was a man named Peter Blow. Now, in those days, we were considered property. So Scott was purchased by an army surgeon named John Emerson, who moved Scott from the enslaved state of Missouri to the free state of Illinois, and then again to the free territory of Wisconsin. While in Wisconsin, Dred Scott met Harriet Robinson. They got married and started a family. On May 29, 1840, John Emerson, the man who owned Dred Scott, was transferred to Florida where the Seminole Indian Wars were being fought. And Emerson's wife, Irene, returned to St. Louis to live with her slave-owning father along with Dred Scott and his family. And then in 1843, John Emerson died, and Dred Scott and his family became the sole property of Irene. Now, at some point, Dred Scott attempted to buy he and his family's freedom from Irene, but from what historians can tell, she refused. And in 1846, Dred Scott filed a suit for his freedom in a St. Louis district court. His claim was based on a precedent set by Missouri Supreme Court's 1824 decision in Winnie versus Whitesdale, where a mandate of once free, always free became standard judicial practice. You see, in the state of Missouri, if a person was relocated to a free state or free territory, they were then considered free and couldn't be re-enslaved upon re-entering the slave state. And since John Emerson had taken Dred Scott to live in both Illinois and Wisconsin, a free state and a free territory, it seemed like they had a pretty good case. Now, after some legal to and fro, Dred Scott eventually won his family's freedom in 1850. But the case got appealed to Missouri Supreme Court, which ruled against the lower court's decision, saying, "Times now are not as they were when the former decisions on this subject were made, and Dred Scott and his family were re-enslaved." But that didn't stop Dred Scott. He kept fighting and received assistance from local abolitionist groups who helped him file suit in a federal court. By then, Irene left Missouri and got remarried, and for some reason, the case went from her to her brother John Sanford. And the case eventually made its way to the United States Supreme Court. And that's where everything went to hell. Now, Scott v. Sanford was an insanely powerful Supreme Court case. It literally shaped, molded, and changed the course of American history. And it all traces back to Haiti. You see, when Haiti successfully won their freedom from France, they essentially bankrupted the country. And so Napoleon was forced to sell Louisiana to America to make up some money, which doubled the landmass from 13 colonies to 22 states. Which meant there were new states to add to the Union. And this created some serious tension between the North and the Southern states over the issue of slavery. They wanted to know, of these new states that Louisiana gave us, which states would be free, which would be slave states, and which states get to decide for themselves. Now, most northern states wanted to end African enslavement, while most southern states wanted to keep Africans enslaved forever. Now, this dispute led to the Missouri Compromise, which made any part of Louisiana north of the Mason-Dixon line free territory, and any part below it was slave territory. You see, Missouri would be a slave state, and then they would bring in Maine, and that would become a free state, and that would balance congressional power as more states were entering the Union. And as with most legal decisions, it hurt black people worse than everyone else. Why? Because as the United States expanded, more and more people wanted to travel across state lines, and that created some very unique legal issues. You see, the question at the heart of Dred Scott's argument was, if an enslaved person is moved from a slave state to a free state, is that individual now free? What if you're on a train leaving a slave state and you pass through a free state? Is your enslaved African free while on the train while it's in the free state, but then re-enslaved when it passes back into a slave state? These were questions the country was dealing with for the very first time, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Now, on March 6, 1857, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 against Dred Scott. Now, 7 of those Supreme Court justices were slave owners. Now, Chief Justice Roger Taney wrote the majority opinion that Scott didn't have legal standing to sue because enslaved Africans were not citizens of the United States. He ruled that whether you're free or enslaved, the Constitution does not apply to black people or their descendants. He said that for more than a century before the Constitution was written, people like me, black people, were regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race. That people like me were so far inferior that I have no rights in which the white man is bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for my benefit. Now that ruling pissed abolitionists off because it prevented any discussions about where enslaved Africans could exist within the United States. Not only that, it literally set the nation on fire. Most historians point to that Supreme Court case as the one that led us on a direct path to the Civil War. Don't believe me? This is Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederate. Here he is seen with a black man he had enslaved since childhood. Just 4 years after the Dred Scott decision, Alexander Stephens says that the Confederate is a new government. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro, me, people who look like me, that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is my natural and normal condition. Ruling against Dred Scott was the worst decision the Supreme Court ever made. It's also its most shameful. That one court case created a new legal precedent and a mindset that solidified black people's status as an underclass in America. It kept us from being able to vote. Sound familiar? It prevented us from being able to defend ourselves from explicit discrimination. Sound familiar? It even prevented us from being able to defend ourselves against domestic terrorism at the hands of white Americans. Sound familiar? Same script, different cast. Now yes, some black people were successful in court after Scott v. Sanford, but it wasn't the norm. They were incidents. Because black people were now legally prevented from filing suits at the federal level. Now, even though they passed the 14th Amendment, which overturned Scott v. Sanford by upholding birthright citizenship, that law did nothing to change the mindset of white Americans who still looked at black people as second and third class citizens. The Scott v. Sanford decision also played a huge role in United States immigration policy for decades. It created this idea that if you were not considered a white American, then you were not entitled to dignity or safety. This created a system that forced immigrants to start proving in social settings and in court that they were white enough to have benefits of citizenship just to get the basic opportunities provided in the United States. This is why many European immigrants changed their last names when immigrating to America. They knew they weren't on the same team, but they were wearing the same uniform and could therefore get the benefits afforded.